Hi, I'm Doug. Welcome to my video. This video is about using an AMD Radeon RX 6800 in a 5.1 Classic Mac Pro. I've had this card in my machine for about a month now, and it's going really well. So I thought I would put a little video together to share my experience and look at some benchmarks and talk about performance and things like that. This video got long, like really long, longer than I would like to watch a YouTube video. So instead of cutting it out, I've pretty much left it all in here so you can take a deep dive into issues like power and dimensions and performance and things like that if you're interested. I'll give you the executive summary of this right up front. First of all, we're going to look at the card, do an unboxing, look at the physical card. We're going to look at the installation issues that you get into. This is a 2-slot thick card. The AMD RX 6800 reference model is a 2-slot thick card, so it is the most powerful card you can put in a Mac Pro and run macOS and not cover up any of the other 3 slots. I will say right up front, this card either requires Big Sur or Monterey. The drivers for this card didn't come into macOS until Big Sur, so if you're back on Mojave or something older than that, you would have to upgrade your macOS to be able to run this card. Of course, like everything, it runs fine in Windows. It loads the drivers in and works perfectly in Windows on your Mac Pro. I do kind of a deep dive into the power situation on here. This card has 2 8-pin PCIe connectors. So on the surface you would say, well, that needs a Pixlas mod. There's no way you should power this from the backplane. However, the 6800 is a 250 watt card. So that puts it kind of on the ragged edge, I think, of what you can power from the backplane. And looking at some Mac Rumors discussions and House of Moth post and some other things, I made the decision to go ahead and try it with backplane power. So I have 2 mini 6-pin to 8-pin cables connecting this to the backplane. And a month in, it's working fine. I haven't had a single shutdown, and even as I watch the power monitor, it doesn't get up to 250 watts. Only if I'm running like a Unigine Superposition benchmark does it even approach that. I've run a lot of Flight Simulator on it, and it doesn't approach, I mean, it rarely ever even gets over 200 watts in Flight Sim. So far, I mean, I don't want to unilaterally say that this card doesn't need a Pixlas mod, but so far from what I see, it's running fine without it. Also going to look at some benchmarks. I'm running Geekbench 5 Metal to give you an idea. As I say later in the video, I really don't know how to take these Geekbench scores or what they mean or anything, so I wouldn't mind some comments to explain to me what these benchmarks are really telling me. But I can tell you this, the RX 6800 in the Classic Mac Pro gets a whole lot bigger Geekbench score than the 6600 XT or the 5600 XT. So to the people that are going to say, this is so stupid putting such a powerful GPU in this old Mac Pro, you're just throwing money away, this makes no sense at all. If you're looking at benchmark scores, you're getting real performance increases. If you're looking at real applications, I'm not sure that you're getting that. So I think this is a card that might appeal to some people with specific use cases, but probably not everybody. I mean, I think it doesn't take away the RX 580 from probably being the best fit GPU for the Mac Pro 5.1, but I think there are some people that can benefit from additional GPU performance. And this is a really good choice for people who want additional GPU performance, maybe you want to do some Windows gaming and get some more frames per second out of your GPU, but don't want to go with the Pixlas mod and the triple slot bigger cards like the RX 6800 XT or the RX 6900. Do some comparison in Flight Sim, and the conclusion on that is if you're flying over a city area in Flight Sim, upgrading cards makes no difference. The 5600 XT got me to 1440p. RX 580 didn't. I upgraded from the 580 to the 5600 XT to be able to really run it at 1440, and that worked fine. If I'm flying over New York City or Sydney or some other city area, I can upgrade from the 5600 XT to the 6600 XT to the 6800, and I get no difference in frames per second. If I'm flying over a rural area, mountains or oceans or lakes or just Yosemite Park or whatever, then I do get increased performance because the bottleneck is not in the computer, it's in the graphics at that point. So yeah, I mean, there is some bottlenecking. There is some loss of performance that you would get in this card if it were in a, you know, up-to-date PC or 2019 Mac maybe. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, you do get some increased performance, and I'm keeping the card, by the way. I'm going to put my RX 6600 XT up for sale because a month into this, I do get better performance out of this card at times. At times it doesn't make any difference, and I like it. That's really the main thing. I think it looks great in my machine. I like the color match, the silver black aesthetic of it, the way that it looks in there, and yeah, so that's where I'm at. I'm going to keep this card. I'm going to sell the RX 6600 XT, and as far as I'm concerned, this is my forever and ever Mac Pro graphics card. Finally, at the end of the video, I'm going to show you how to modify the VBIOS. I've done this before in the RX 6600 XT. I have a video out there that goes into more detail on that than this video is going to include, but I went ahead and included it in this video just to make it complete, so I put it all the way at the end. I did use that trick I learned from Lansing McVicker, where you don't actually have to do any command line commands to do this operation. You simply take the file and you drag it and you drop it on top of the Syncretic fix tool. But I'll show you how to do that, and so that'll wrap up the video. Oh, one more thing. I wanted to know whether the USB-C port on the card would substitute, say, for having a USB 3 card on your Mac Pro. So, and really what I wanted to do is take this USB multi-port adapter and plug this into the USB-C port on the card and see if I could get HDMI output and USB output from that. So the answer is on Windows, everything works fine. I get HDMI out the video port, I get USB out the USB port. I've tried it on a USB hub, hard drive, flash drive, keyboard and mouse, and all worked fine in Windows. In macOS, the USB didn't work at all. I got no signs of life whatsoever from USB devices plugged in through the GPU's USB-C port. So assume that the chipset that's in this card that handles the USB doesn't work under macOS. If anybody has a solution to that, please let me know. I would love to be able to ditch my USB 3 card and just, you know, plug my USB hub into the GPU's USB. But anyway, I'm not using it now because I need to use my USB devices both in Windows and Mac OS, and so for now I have them plugged into the USB 3 card. So I hope you enjoy the video, and please give me comments, let me know what you think. I always enjoy the discussion after these. Thanks. This card is the AMD reference model of the RX 6800. It's not the XT, and I chose the 6800 rather than the XT for a couple reasons. One is that the 6800 is a dual slot card, so it doesn't take away any additional slots when you put it in the Mac Pro. And the other reason, the reason I chose the 6800 and not the 6800 XT is the 6800 has 250 watt typical board power rating, where the 6800 XT has 300 watts. As I take the card out of the box, one of the things I really like about it is it's black and silver, just like the Mac Pro. Blends in really well with the inside of the Mac Pro. It's a heavy card. It has kind of a really premium feel to it. It's all metal outside, front and back. This is the reference model, as I mentioned, and what that means, if you're not familiar with reference models, is that this is the design that AMD first introduced this GPU into. And it's their own design. It was built by Sapphire, MSI, PowerColor, a number of different board partners with their own branding on it, but the reference models all look just like this. As for ports, it has an HDMI, 2 display ports, and a USB-C port. And that got me wondering, could I use the USB-C port with, let's say, a multi-port adapter like this, and convert it to both an HDMI out and a USB-C output. Maybe wouldn't even need a USB card. So that was something I wanted to try with this. It is a dual 8-pin power connector card. So what I'm going to do to power it is use this mini 6-pin to 8-pin cable, and it'll take 2 of those, and I'm going to power it from the backplane. So I have some more discussion on that. So here's a view inside the Mac Pro showing the PCI card slots, and they're at the right, and then of course the 2 PCIe auxiliary power connectors are on the left toward the bottom of the picture. I'll show you a close-up of those. But you can see the spacing of the cards. The bottom slot is put in there at a double wide length, so that's the slot that Apple intends the GPU to be located in. Apple designed this, of course, for double wide, double slot GPUs, and if you put a 2.5 slot GPU in, then that's going to cover up the slot above it and make it inaccessible, unusable. Most RX 6800s and up are 2.5 slots. They have coolers that are larger than 2 slots thick and will cover up the next slot above. So the 6800 non-XT reference card is the most powerful card that you can put in your Mac Pro that will not cover up any additional slots and leave all 3 additional slots available. Over toward the left here, you see a little Frank and a big Frank printed on the circuit board. I'm curious about that. If anybody knows who Little Frank and Big Frank are, or why we have Little Frank and Big Frank printed on our backplanes, let me know. Could be an interesting story there. So you can see here that it does leave open the 3 additional slots, so you could put a card in above it in the 16-lane slot. Again, I wouldn't want to put too big a card in because this card is drawing airflow in from the top and exhausting it out, you know, the sides, which you can see here, that little grill you see, that's where it exhausts the air out. You know, the card's not going to be able to cool properly if you block that off. You could move it up a slot, and that would save your top slot and then give your 16 slot below. As far as power, you see the mini 6-pin to 8-pin cables, 2 of them that are running from the back plane to the card. Normally, you would say don't use this cable. An 8-pin connector is good for 150 watts, and we know that the mini 6-pin backplane connector is only good for about 120. So there is a chance that the card's going to want to overdraw these connectors. Per the PCIe standard, a slot provides up to 75 watts to the card. The PCIe standard provides a 6-pin connector for 75 watts and an 8-pin connector for 150 watts. The classic Mac Pro has the 2 mini 6-pin connectors on the back plane, and if we say because they're 6-pin, they're good for 75 watts each, and then we have the slot to add to that. That's a total of 225 watts available. But who says the backplane mini 6-pin connectors are only good for 75? I think we're assuming that because they're 6-pin, but Apple, you know, doesn't always follow standards and they over-design things. And well, the truth of the matter is Apple doesn't say what the rating of those backplane connectors are. As far as I know, I've looked for it in the technical service manuals and such and have not found it. So there have been user tests, and I'll link a MacRumor discussion about this, but they've found that the backplane mini 6-pin ports have overcurrent protection, and they'll shut off the machine at a little over 120 watts per port. So if you wanted to take this all the way to the shutdown, power draw could theoretically be as high as 75 watts from the slot, plus 2 times 120 watts from the backplane, 315 watts. However, graphics cards have power spikes, and so if you get too close to the shutdown point, then it's going to shut down. The MacRumor discussion, one of our Mac Pro Upgrade group experts concluded that if the card is 275 watts or less, he would recommend powering it from the backplane. We know that the backplane has protection for overcurrent, and we know that it'll shut the machine off before it, say, fries the backplane. There is another option, that's the Pixlas mod. I'll talk about that in a minute, but the Pixlas mod does not have protection. So going through the backplane gives you overcurrent protection, and the idea is that you know, if we could get 75 watts from the slot, and if we got 100 watts from each of the backplane connectors, that would be the 275, and that should work okay. Now, I don't know how the card's going to balance the power draw between the 2 backplane connectors and the slot power. So, you know, we need to leave some margin in there because we really have no way of knowing that. So the typical board power of this card, the RX 6800 non-XT, is 250 watts. So that leaves a total margin of 65 watts from the 315 theoretical max possible. And again, I don't know how that 65 watt margin is distributed between the backplane connectors and the slot. It seems like a comfortable number. The House of Moth blog post that is also linked was interesting. It's a blog post on Is Pixlas Mod Required? Now the Pixlas Mod is a modification that many Mac Pro owners have used to be able to use cards that require more power than can be drawn from the backplane. And so if you have a greater than 275 watt card, for example, the 6800 XT is a 300 watt typical board power, then you really need to put the Pixlas mod in or use an external GPU. The Pixlas mod is much cleaner than an external GPU, and that's what most people do. But that involves cutting insulation off of wires coming off the power supply, putting wire taps in. You have to take a good part of your machine apart to get to all this and route these cables down behind the optical drive cage and into the area where the GPU is and run. Essentially, you're just bypassing the backplane power connectors and running it straight from the GPU. The risk of that, it seems to work pretty well. Lots of people use it. But the risk of that is there is no overcurrent protection on that. So if a card for some reason is faulting out and trying to draw a lot more power than it should, then nothing will stop it that way. Personally, I don't want to install Pixlas mod on my machine, not because really I'm afraid of it overdrawing and catching fire or anything. It's more because I just don't want to get in and mess that up. I kind of want to leave my machine more original and as Apple designed it. So I thought, having read all this, I decided to try to install it without the Pixlas mod, see how it goes. If I do have machine shutdowns, then either I'm going to decide to install the Pixlas or sell the card. So if the card gives me really good performance gains, but I'm having shutdowns, then I'm going to install Pixlas mod. If it's not giving me really good performance gains, then I might just go back to the RX 6600 XT and then sell the card. So now I've had it in there for a month, and I've not had a single problem, not had a single shutdown. Run it with the two backplane connectors, and it's really, there has been no problem at all with this card. So I don't want to say by myself Pixlas mod is not required for this card, although that is my experience. My use case may not be one that really pulls the most power from this card. When I watch the power monitor in the AMD software, it doesn't approach 250 watts. So I think the software I'm running really is just not loading this card up. Somebody else's use case might. So I think we need more people to try it and run this way and kind of weigh in on whether this card needs the Pixlas mod or not. But so far, I haven't. Now, the most power demanding thing I've done so far is the Unigine Superposition benchmark. And that gets it over 200 watts power draw. I can play Microsoft Flight Simulator all day long and never get over 200 watts. So let's look at some benchmarks. I'm not a benchmark person, and I really don't know how to interpret these numbers. I mean, I can see the difference in numbers, but I don't know what that really means, and I'm kind of suspect of this Geekbench score anyway. But hey, since we need some way of comparison, let's look at the Geekbench 5 metal score on the RX 6800, and it's 131,349. I also ran it on the RX 6600 XT, and that's 88,894. And also ran it on the RX 5600 XT, which is 23,008. Again, I don't know how to interpret these numbers, but this really seems suspect to me. So this is saying the RX 6600 XT is 4 times the 5600 XT. That doesn't seem realistic from what I've seen. I do see a significant jump between the 6600 XT and the RX 6800. Let's look at a different benchmark. Let's look at Unigine Superposition running on Windows. Now the first thing I'm going to notice about Superposition, by the way, is it misidentified 2 of my 3 GPUs. So down here in the yellow highlighted red text, it identified it as an RX 5700 XT, 6 gigabytes. It's really an RX 5600 XT. I don't know why it misidentified it. The Geekbench didn't. The Geekbench identified all my cards correctly. 3982 for the RX 5600 XT, and that's 24 frames per second. 5576 score and 33 frames per second for the RX 6600 XT. and that's 140% versus the RX 5600 XT. This seems about right to me. I mean, having used both of them in gaming and use and everything, to say that the 5600 XT is 40% better than the 5600 XT seems good. And now the RX 6800, again, it was misidentified as an RX 6900 XT by the Unigine. I know I don't have a 6900 XT. Anyway, the score is 8611 and 46 frames per second. Minimum. I guess these are minimum frame rates that I'm reading off here. So the score difference is 216% versus the RX 5600 XT. And it's 154% versus the RX 6600 XT. So I tend to think of 50% better as being a worthy upgrade on GPUs, and so this would be definitely a worthy upgrade from the 6600 XT. So benchmark scores show that in the Mac Pro, this card can run and give us good benchmark scores. So the discussion you always get into is, and I'm sure people are going to comment on this and they're going to say, what an idiot. You know, you're putting a $550 super expensive modern card in a 12 or 13-year-old Mac Pro. Your RAM speed, your PCI speed, your processor speed, everything's just going to limit the performance of this card. How ridiculous can you get? If you're just running benchmarks, it actually shows a huge improvement from what I had before, so that would be completely worthwhile. But who cares about benchmarks? What we care about is what programs do we run and does it perform in those programs? So the actual result on what I was wanting it for was a bit disappointing, really. So let's look at Microsoft Flight Simulator. Flight Simulator is a great game to have if you have family over on a winter day, and they visit and we talk and everything, and things are getting boring. I can grab somebody and say, hey, let's learn how to land an Airbus A320 at Sydney, Australia. And people enjoy it. Now you can talk them through a landing or something, or we can go fly over their house and something. It's a really incredible program. I love it. And I have to say that my older son has a nice gaming machine. And when I told him that I was upgrading my GPUs to be able to run Flight Sim on my Mac Pro, he said, you're not going to be happy with that. That's not going to give you good results, and you really need a new computer. It's not just a matter of upgrading the GPU. You need the whole deal. Until he saw it running. First of all, when I had the RX 580 in it, and he saw it running at 1080p, and he said, wow, that's really good. Then I went to the RX 5600 XT, and went to the full 1440 ultra wide running, and he said, I can't believe this machine's doing this well. And it really does pretty well. Let's go over to the performance metrics on the right here. The frames per second is 31, and 31 doesn't sound like much if you're talking, if you're used to the action shooter games where you're panning around and everything. But in Flight Sim, it actually works pretty good. I mean, you're seeing the world come at you fairly slowly, and 31 frames per second, as long as it's a smooth 31 frames per second, it looks pretty good. You look out the side window and you might be able to see a little that choppiness of the frame rate. But if you're looking out the front, it doesn't matter. And that doesn't matter whether you're inside the plane or if you do the outside view, it looks pretty good. Still, I want to have that immersive experience and get even better than that. So that's the reason I keep upgrading these cards. And believe me, I have no intention of upgrading beyond the 6800 at this point. Look at the GPU utilization, second from the top in the metrics here, and notice the trend that the GPU utilization is just bouncing up and down all over the place. That really shows me that this is machine limited. This is limited either by the processor or the memory or the PCI speed or the network speed or something. And it may be that the network is loading in this data, and that's the bottleneck. The map data and the photogrammetry data. But it also could be that the CPU is limiting by main thread. Now, if you look at these CPU utilizations, that's the bottom metric that's in green there, it never goes above 50% CPU utilized. But it appears that what's happening is it's main thread limited, meaning one core of the CPU is loaded up and the rest of the cores are sitting around waiting for something to do. And that I can't fix. I can't change that on this machine. Let's compare this with the other cards. So here it is with 6600 XT, and here it is with the 5600 XT. This is the same Sydney landing challenge at about the same point in it. And they're all running at 31 frames per second. So from the 5600 XT all the way to the 6800, I got a 0 improvement on frames per second. So that's disappointing. On this specific instance, I'm not getting any real gameplay benefit out of it. Look at the GPU utilizations though. Notice how the 5600 XT, the trend line on that is 99% all the time. And the 6600 XT, it's up there most of the time with some dips. And then the 6800 is just all over the place. When I had the 5600 XT, based on that GPU utilization, I thought, well, if I get a better GPU, it's going to play better. And then I got the 6600 XT, and it still looked pretty loaded up most of the time. And then the 6800, just definitely not loaded. But hey, this is a city area, and city areas are different than non-city areas in flight sim. City areas have a lot of photogrammetry processing to deal with. It has to draw all these buildings, thousands of buildings out there. And if you get out in the country, over the mountains or over rivers or lakes or whatever, then it's a different situation. So let's take a look at one that's more rural. We're going to go to Bugalaga. This is the Bugalaga Landing Challenge. And I should mention that all of these are shown running 3440 by 1400p, that's ultra wide 1440p resolution, and at the high quality setting. So now we're at, we were at 31 frames per second on the Sydney landing challenge. Now we're at 45 frames per second. Again, 45 frames per second is pretty good on flight sim. I mean, that's a pretty smooth look. Certainly, I mean, really, even 31 frames per second is easily playable, but 45 is really good. And GPU utilization, ignore the third at the left of the trend line on GPU utilization, because that's kind of that startup. When you first start in there, it bobbles around, but then the lines will usually stabilize as you get more into the play. So the GPU utilization is fairly high here. It's not staying right at 99% all the time, but it's pretty well utilized in this. And I find that if I'm flying over the Rocky Mountains or the, Ohio or anywhere else, the GPU is much more heavily utilized than it is over, say, New York City. But anyway, we're getting 45 frames per second. Power draw is 176 watts. Again, nowhere close to the 250 that we're expecting this card to take. And I can play this thing all day long and never see 200 watts. GPU fan is a little over half speed, 1661 RPM. Temperatures are good. Again, CPU utilization below 50%. Looks like there was maybe a little bop there quick where it went over 50, but I never see it. It's using 9.2 gigs of my 24 gigabytes of RAM. I'm not sure why it's not using more. But let's compare it with the RX 6600 XT and the RX 5600 XT. Again, same landing challenge and about the same time. And here we do see that the 6800 did give us a nice improvement in frame rates from 30 to 34 to 45. That was quite an improvement from 34 to 45. And you'll see that the 5600 XT and the 6600 XT are pretty much pegged at 98, 99% all the time after that initial little startup bobble. And the 6800, it's pretty well utilized, but not completely. 6800 is using 176 watts. The something about the RX 5600 and 6600 I should point out, those are both power color cards. And power color seems to want to keep the fan speeds low at the expense of temperature. So the GPU junction temperature are 92 and 93 degrees on the two power color cards, where it's a full 10 degrees less than that on the AMD 6800. And that's a fan speed issue. I mean, none of them are turning the fans at full speed. The 6600 XT is a fighter, which has a really small cooler on it. So yeah, you are seeing some higher fan speeds from that, because it does have to push more air through that small cooler to keep the temperature. But regardless, it's not anywhere near full speed, so we're not limiting anything by temperature. The temperatures look hot, but that's what Power Color chooses to run the card at. And my research says that AMD says we can get that junction temperature up to 110 degrees and it's okay. I'm glad it's not. I worry about the longevity of the cards. So that's performance. So to summarize all that, the benchmarks look really great. The benchmarks show that we're getting super high increase in performance with the newer cards. But Microsoft Flight Simulator is a mixed bag. If you're in an urban area flying over where it has to draw many, many buildings, then you're not seeing a frame rate improvement. But if you fly in the country, in the mountains or whatever, then you do see a frame rate improvement. So I'm keeping the card because I do want to get the best score I can wherever I am. I do understand that if I bought a brand new PC and spent $1,500 or $2,000 on it, that this card would give me a lot better performance than that. I'm okay with what I have right now, so I don't want to buy a new PC. I love the Mac Pro. I love the design of it. I do recognize that it's not modern and doesn't perform along with brand new PCs. But, that's what I want to keep right now. I'm happy with this card. I wish it performed a little better in some of these, but, I'm going to keep it. Starting at Syncretic's post number 887 on Mac Rumors, I'm going to quickly move through how you would flash this card. First of all, you have to put it in a PC. It will not boot if installed in a Mac Pro until after the VBIOS has been updated. So there are two main posts that Syncretic put in here. The second one, 909, is the one that has the Windows version of the fix tool. And since we have to use a Windows computer to download the VBIOS and to flash the VBIOS, it's simpler just to do the fix on the Windows PC. So I'll download this fix RX6X00 ROM.zip file and go ahead and extract it in the folder. I have my downloads set to this USB-G drive so that everything will just automatically download while I'm doing this. Next process, go to Tech Power Up, find AMD VB Flash, and pick a server and download that. And I'll unzip it as well, or extract it, I guess, in Windows Talk, to this folder, extract it, and get rid of the zip file once that's done, because I don't need the zip file anymore. Finally, I'll go to the Tech Power Up GPU-Z site, download the GPU-Z file, pick a server, and I'm going to run these programs right off the USB drive. I'm not going to install them on the hard drive or anything. So this one takes a little longer, doesn't have to be unzipped. So now we're ready to download the VBIOS from the card. And so to do that, I'll start up GPU-Z. When the screen goes black like this, it has that security message that you have to agree to keep going. It doesn't record it for somehow. This is the Save BIOS button on GPU-Z, so you click that, save to file. While it's doing that, you can look at the specs of this card, and it gives me a file name of Navi space 21. Save that right to the root of G drive. And then I'm going to copy that and then go to the fix RX6X00 ROM folder and paste it there. So I made an extra copy just so I don't screw up the original, keep the original where it was, and then use this one. Now I learned this trick from Lansing McVicker. I have no idea how you need to do this, but all you have to do is take this file, drag it over top of the fix tool, and it just does it. You don't have to do any command line commands or anything. I think it's amazing. I don't know how Lansing knew to do that, but I will happily copy his idea. So we have a patched file ready to go. Now we're going to go to the AMD VB Flash and read the README. Before you use the AMD VB Flash program, you have to run an installer and install the hardware driver. And they also tell you to uninstall the driver after you're finished because of a security risk on your system. So go ahead and run the AMD VB Flash driver installer program. Gives me a security again, which records as a black screen. I for install the driver. So it's been installed successfully now. Press any key to continue. And then I'm going to open the AMD VB Flash. And actually what I want is the AMD VB Flash window. This time through I accidentally clicked the DOS version of it. So try that again. The VB Flash Windows is what I want. Okay, now I need to load image. I need to find that patched zip file, or I'm sorry, the patched video BIOS file, which is here. So click open, there it is loaded in, ready to go. And then I would push the program button then to upload that to the card. I'm not actually going to do this because I'm showing you this after the fact, but the cards are actually already has the patched file loaded. I'm really running this for my Mac Pro, so this has already been done to the card. But that's the exact process you go to. And here I am putting everything away, and then I realize, oops, I forgot to uninstall the driver. So now I need to go back to my G drive and run the AMD VB Flash driver installer program again. And it gives you that security thing which blacks out the screen. Push U for uninstall and continue, and now it's been uninstalled, and now we're done.